There we are. I am joined by the one and only Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst and a great friend of the show, to put it mildly, the man that got me into radio. How you doing, Garland? You doing all right this morning?
Great, great. Always a pleasure to come on.
Oh man, it's always a pleasure to have you. I always appreciate having you on the show. I want to start with Trump nominees. People are freaking out. And when I say freaking out, I mean freaking out. I've been watching the ladies of The View give their take. They have been having cringe-worthy clips going for the last several weeks since Donald Trump's election. Whoopi Goldberg is on a sex strike. She said her vagina is closed for the next 4 years. I am hurt greatly by that because I was thirsty like nobody's business for some Whoopi Goldberg. But nonetheless, some of these picks, Tulsi Gabbard for DNI, I actually like. I actually like RFK for Human Health and Human Services. The other ones, less so. But I'm waiting to see what this looks like in real terms and how bad this gets in real terms. But I think what Democrats need to recognize is that Donald Trump was elected for this very specific reason, to shake things up. And that is exactly what he is doing. And by the way, before I even get to that, I want to go to something else. Joe Biden deciding to blow off the election result. And despite the vote of no confidence from the American public in regards to his foreign policy as compared to that of what Trump stated Trump's foreign policy would be, he escalates dramatically and fires off missiles into Russia. And this is after Putin said this was a red line and that we will be at war with NATO if indeed this takes place. From your point of view, why is he doing this? I mean, it's not like it's going to change the context of the war. And it's like you are risking oblivion for what? Because you're not going to change the context of the war. This is not a magical weapon. The weapon has been used currently and has not necessarily been showing any gains. Why do you think he's doing this?
A couple of things. I think that rather than doing this in spite of the outcome of the elections, and I think a lot of people would agree, Joe Biden's doing this specifically because of the outcome of the elections. You know what I mean? They lost. So he's, the old turn over the chessboard. Yeah, turn over the chessboard, right? I think there's a couple of things. There's spite for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I think there's also a complete disregard for human life, a disregard for the trouble it could potentially cause and the danger and all of that. The recklessness and disregard for human life is very, very obvious. I remember reading the New York Times article that they had, and they said he was well aware of the risks, but he felt that the gains was higher. And I'm thinking, in what universe do you do what do they call it? The risk analysis, right?
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Analysis.
Cost benefit, analysis. And you say, well, the cost potentially is the end of human life on Earth.
Yes.
Let's look at the benefits. As soon as you do that, you stop looking at the benefits. There are no benefits to discuss if the risk is the end of human life on Earth.
Right.
He demonstrated to the world why he needs to be out of office. He showed the world, this is why me and everybody around me need to be out of office, because we are reckless, sociopathic, psychopathic lunatics.
Yes, absolutely right. It's just mind-blowing to me. Like, you lose an election where this was litigated and you lose.
Right.
And your response is, yeah, I'm going to now escalate now that I've lost this election and now that the American public said they don't agree with me. Scott Ritter's point of view was that Joe Biden is doing this in order to get close, basically to drag Ukraine into NATO within the last 2 months, to accelerate this process of creating a de facto NATO Ukraine. And the belief being that, A, Putin is bluffing, or that they can salami slice their way, basically taking one incremental step after the next in order to ingratiate NATO further into Ukraine, even up to the point of having troops in Ukraine itself, in Western Ukraine. I was watching Jake Sullivan. I wanted you to hear this. This is Jake Sullivan talking about what they're doing now, basically saying, look, the attack Adams is not going to change the context of the battle. What they need is manpower, because they're lacking in manpower. And so it's like, okay, so you acknowledge that this is not going to change the battlefield at all. You acknowledge that they have lost so many people that they are hurting in manpower. And listen to what he suggests Ukraine do.
It shows us something between
this.
what you see and what you don't.
All right, I'm going to play Jake Sullivan when Jake Sullivan comes back when they finish their commercial. But I'm going to play that when it finishes. But all things being equal, he is basically saying Ukraine needs to draft more of its population. That, yeah, we understand they are losing hundreds of thousands of people, but you need to drag in your kids, the 20-year-olds. You need to bring them onto the battlefield and put them in the meat grinder. Like, this is sociopathic and cynical, to put it mildly. Give me a take on that. In fact, right here. Here he is.
Okay,
so
here we go. Yeah.
Sullivan.
Can't hear it.
Okay, wait a minute. Give me 1 second. 1 second, 1 second. All right, I think this one. 1 second.
Oh, yeah, there we go. No.
Okay, here we go.
Our view has been that there's not one weapon system that makes a difference in this battle. It's about manpower, and Ukraine needs to do more, in our view, to firm up its lines in terms of the number of forces it has on the front lines. It's about munitions, and it's about all of the other things that go to a country's national strength, their morale, their cohesion, their industrial base.
But I ask because Ukraine is losing more territory today than at any point this year. So do you really believe that nothing the U.S. could have done earlier would have changed that?
We've provided the tanks, we provided the F-16s, we provided the HIMARS, we provided the Patriots, we provided many of the things that you said earlier we wouldn't provide. And it's not back then, it's rather today that Ukraine finds itself in a more challenged position on the battlefield.
I'm astonished by this conversation because the guy points to him, he says, you know, they're losing more ground than they ever have. And he says, don't you think that you could have done something different? He's like, well, we provided them with everything. They just need to bring in more people. So it's like, so they've been fighting a war for 3 years. You've given them any and everything that you had in your inventory, even to the point where you've exhausted yourself. And your response to that is, okay, they've lost. We need to find a way to stop in this war. What's the point of senseless deaths going forward? Their response is, we need more people to die.
Well, two things. Number one thing's obvious. When they said fight to the last Ukrainian, boy, they really meant it, didn't they? They weren't joshing around with that one because, I mean, the answer could be, hey, you know, they're losing the war. It looks like they're going to lose. Yeah, but they got more Ukrainians left, don't they? Yeah, well, keep on rolling, brother. It's one thing's obvious. The goal, and they're getting louder and louder about it. The goal is not to win because it's clear to everybody that Ukraine can't win. Right. The goal is to keep Ukraine fighting until they can't fight anymore, only because they've run out of people. We've wiped out, you know, all the young men. We'll put in the old men. Now we've wiped out the young and the old men. We'll put in younger and older men. Well, now we've wiped out the younger and older men. How we fix for women? They're Ukrainian, aren't they? Yeah. Then it's time for them to die. It is the most cynical, brutal, reckless disregard for human life one can ever imagine. So right now, the other thing that's obvious from that is, since he pretty much acknowledges that the goal now is not for them to win, we acknowledge they can't win, but we want them to keep fighting as long as they have people, that this attack'ems thing is not about winning. We know they can't win. We know they can't win it. So then, since it's not about winning, what is it? And I'll go back to this. It's turning over the chessboard. It's maybe dragging Europe into a war, into World War III that Trump can't get out of. This is about Trump. First of all, they've made it clear and obvious, the Biden administration and the neocons, that they don't give a crap about democracy anywhere on earth. So if they don't give a crap about democracy in Georgia or Venezuela or anywhere else, why would they really care about it here? Yeah, they don't. So their position is this: we lost, but we got a problem, and that is this. What happens if we always view the Ukrainian project, and we call it the Ukrainian project, as the Ukrainian conflict. It's not a conflict. It's part of a overall neocon project to dominate the world. We've got to weaken Russia. So then we can weaken Russia, overthrow the government. Then we can control its natural resources. That means we can take out China. That means if we control all of that oil, we can then control the countries in the Middle East, because we can control the price of the water. So it's a project, but part of a larger project. So what they're saying is this: this may, as a conflict in and of itself, may be lost, but maybe as part of the larger project, we can still inject life into this and keep the larger project going. Because to some extent, if Trump or whoever comes in and says, look, let's get a deal, and the Ukraine project, it's such an integral part of the world domination project. If Trump just says, we can't do this anymore, screw this.
Yeah.
The neocon project is dead. And add this. What is Trump saying about Taiwan? He's transactional. Hey, if they're scared of China, why won't they buy their own stuff? They can pay. In other words, that's kind of killing the Taiwan project, because it's not a transactional project where we sell them stuff and they pay it. That's the way Trump sees it. It is, let's pump them full of weapons so they can get blown to hell. And they're Ukraine 2.0.
Right.
So if Trump comes in and says, nah, let's not treat them as part of a world domination project. Let's look at them individually in a transactional way and say, we're getting screwed by this particular thing. It ain't working for us.
Yeah. No,
the world domination project craps out. And so I think they're trying to save the world domination project from creating blowing this conflict up, turning over the chessboard, and putting Trump in a position where it'll be very difficult for him to get out of it. I think that's what that's all about, to some extent.
It is massively dangerous. I mean, when you really think about it. And by the way, you're right about Taiwan. I mean, I don't think people realize it. We use countries almost as proxies because we don't want to get into the direct exchanges with nuclear powers. And so somewhere along the way, instead of having this kind of massive Cold War, it's like, okay, we can use Ukraine to go after Russia and to undercut Russia. We can use Taiwan to undercut China. We can use terrorists in Syria to undercut Assad. We can use kill squads to undercut governments in South America. Like, it seems to be playbook, even in Georgia. If you look at Georgia, where you have an opposition, where a fair law ends up getting the U.S. pissed off. And it's like, okay, what do you have to do with a fair law that they're passing there that we also have in this country? And you see these massive protests that are taking place that were basically created in order to put pressure on that government with the idea of trying to get the government to fall. They wanted to use Georgia as a second front to Russia. Like, this stuff is insane. Like, what they're willing to put people and put the countries through for geopolitical expansionary reasons. Now, I totally agree with you. I guess the catch becomes, does Trump actually mean what he says in regards to shutting down wars? And I guess two, how far and how reckless is Joe Biden willing to go? Meaning, is Ritter right that the objective is, we're going to, in 2 months, do everything in our power to pull Ukraine as close to NATO as possible, which on some level is going to provoke a Russian response that has to be significant enough in order to get across that we are not effing around. How do you think Russia's going to respond to this? I mean, because there's something to be said for a response calibrated to be strong enough to indicate we are serious, while simultaneously not going too far. Because up to this point, they've always taken Putin's pragmatism as a weakness. Give me a take on that. How far do you think Russia's going to go with this? Or what do you think they can do? I know this is kind of beyond the scope of our typical conversation, but I am curious. We worked on the network for God knows how long. We've paid attention to this stuff for the last decade. What do you think? And how do you think Russia is going to respond to this? And do you think Ritter is right that the response has to be strong enough in order to demonstrate, stop screwing with us? We're not bluffing. Give me your thoughts.
Well, a couple of things. I think Russia's not, they're not stupid, and they know what Joe Biden's doing, right? They know what he's doing. They're not stupid. So I would say this, put you or an I in this position, right? What would you be thinking? That's what I try to do. What would I think, right? And number one would be, okay, I need a response in a significant way. But number two, I'm not going to screw myself over. I know what you're trying to do, Joe Biden. You want me to start World War III, and damn it, I'm not going to do it. But I got to respond. So I think one of the things Russia could do, what happens if they respond in a way that both shows their determination to respond and at the same time assists them in their quest to end the conflict, right? So to me, where I would respond is beat the hell out of Ukraine. I wouldn't necessarily fire missiles at, now there's things they can do, such as they could say to Europe, because Europe still buys a lot of gas and oil, still buys a lot of natural resources and stuff from them. So I could say, well, we're calling in our, I don't want to bring home all of my diplomats because I want a diplomatic resolution. Joe Biden would love to see Russia say, we're bringing home all of our diplomats. And the Biden would say, excellent. That makes it harder to get a diplomatic resolution for Trump, right?
Well,
So
Russia,
I'm going to Russia.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. Ritter, his point was kind of like yours, that this needs to be an attack on Ukraine that is so overwhelming that it gets across seriousness. And his thing was to basically flatten Kiev, to hit Kiev. And I think he was talking about killing Zelensky, like Ritter,
Yeah,
just a maximalist point of view. But his point is, if you, in order to stop a nuclear war, you have to do something dramatic. Otherwise, they are going to continue to escalate. I'm sorry, Garland. Please continue.
well, they've got an area, I forgot what street it is, where, like the Rada, their parliament and stuff like that, and a lot of government buildings are. So you could certainly turn that area into rubble. That would send a message, and definitely, I think Zelensky might have signed his death warrant, because you might want to take this guy. I mean, I'm just saying from a tactical perspective, a strategic perspective, and he's a problem. He's in the way. So, hey, you could kill two birds with one stone, right? You could say, we'll both get this guy out of the way because he's a problem. We could send a message to whoever comes to power. You don't want to be like Zelensky, do you? You see what happened to his last smartass who tried to screw us before Trump got in there. Not that they can get a deal with Trump, or they can't. Who knows, right? So I think, yes, you could knock out power. So you could take it out on, to me, I'd take it out on Ukraine. And I would say to Europe, okay, that's it. You're not getting gas. You're not getting fertilizer, all these things that you need. You ain't getting none of it. Screw you. We've been nice enough, and we've still given you some things that you desperately need. We're cutting that. You could do those kinds of things without attacking Europe and giving the neocons what they want. So I think they've got and I think we're both having, the discussion we're having is this: how can the Russians have a strong response and not screw up any possibility for a diplomatic resolution, and not play it into the hand, not take the bait, but still maintain the respect and the respect that they have coming. I mean, and the other part of it too that's good is they've been very successful in blunting the attack. Mm-hmm. So they fired some ATACMS, maybe about 5 or 6 of them. They seem to have shot most of them down. So the good thing for the Russians are, and that was something I forgot. I heard somebody talk about it. Their capabilities to shoot the missiles down is going to make it hard for the attacks to be successful. I think if the Ukrainians were able to hit some citizen, area and kill a lot of citizens, or do something that would really infuriate the Russian people, it would make it harder for the Russian government. But as long as they can shoot those ATACMS missiles down, and the attacks are mostly symbolic, it makes it easier for them to respond.
And they only have 50 missiles. That was the other information that came out recently. So it's like, A, it's not going to change the context of the battlefield. B, you have a limited supply of what you do have to fire off these missiles. And C, this is juxtaposed against potentially the end of the world if one of those missiles get lucky, quote unquote, and actually kills a lot of people.
Or how about this? Or hits a nuclear power plant and causes another Chernobyl.
Yeah.
What happens if they hit some nuclear power plant in Russia and they cause like a Chernobyl? Then the Russians, then basically that's the United States launching a nuclear attack on Russia. And then all bets are off at that point.
Those are U.S. missiles fired by U.S. hands. This is an attack by U.S.-led NATO onto Russian territory. It's just astonishing. They're going to have to somehow create deterrence to get across, or to prevent any level of incremental escalation where NATO gets more and more ingratiated. Because I agree with Ritter. I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. Or the other thought was that Joe Biden was doing this for posterity. That the idea that he's looking at himself at a historical context and saying, okay, in 100 years, when people look back, I want them to say that Joe Biden did everything in his power to ensure that Ukraine remained in Western sphere of influence. And so giving missiles, it's kind of like what Jake Sullivan said. He said, well, we gave them everything they asked for, even things we said that we weren't going to give them at first. Okay, that's another way to look at it. That's more of an innocent way of looking at it. That's not Biden doing it for the purpose of incremental acceleration of Ukraine into NATO. That's more for symbolic reasons.
Can it be both? I mean, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be a combination of all, that they have a discussion. Well, maybe we can turn over the chessboard. Plus, guess what? This thing's get ready to go bad, and then we can say that we did everything. You know what I mean? There could be a number of things that they had in their discussion where the neocons came to Biden and said, look, you got to okay the attackums. And if Biden says why, okay, we got 4 reasons. Number 1, boom. Number 2, number 3, number 4, and putting all of them together. What do you think, Joe? Sure, go ahead. What's the worst that can possibly happen?
It's like this guy is not competent enough to run for another election, but he could totally end the world in regards to this thing.
One other thing I want to comment on Trump's team. Here's the thing about it. When you look at traditionally, you look at the Biden administration and you realize Biden is this feckless, demented guy, that his policies, a lot of them are generated from his cabinet up to him.
Right.
Hey, especially Sullivan and these evil dudes coming together, and they go to Biden and say, let's do this. And he does it. And at some point, people think, well, maybe those two are running the show because this guy's wandering aimlessly about, right? The Rose Garden, seemingly lost. Well, I think a Trump administration would not be bottom up, it'd be top down. I don't think it's as important as Trump chooses, because they're going to do what the hell Trump tells them to do. Look, how many people did he go through? 2 or 3 Secretary of States and 3 or 4 secretaries of defense. You know what I mean? This is effectively a first draft. So you see Trump with a group of people, but Trump, they're going to piss him off or not do something he wants, and he's going to fire. You're fired, and he's going to bring in new ones. So who knows? By the 20th, 2 or 3 of them might be. Let's just say Trump has a little bit of turnover, but why? Because it's top down. Marco Rubio is not going to say to Trump, although I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Apparently that did happen. And I think based on some of the Trump things Trump says, his regrets comes from the things that he did that other people pushed him to do. Right. I think Trump now is going to top down and say, guys, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. The other thing is, the guy's got so much horsepower. He's got real horsepower. He's smashed the entire neocon system to bits from one end to the other, from the claims that they had on various constituencies, minorities, and this group and that group. Sorry, he smashed that paradigm to pieces. The numbers, what states he's supposed to take, he smashed everything to pieces. So he's coming in with so much power. If someone who's a Republican, if Trump says, we want to do this, and a Republican says, I don't want to do it, Trump can go to their district and do like, hey, I'm going to go to your district and I'm going to have a town hall. And everybody in his district, for Republicans, will say, yay, we love Trump. Do what the hell he tells you to do. So the political capital that he has, if he chooses, the question is, what will he choose to spend that political capital on? Right. But he's got a tremendous amount. So I think the people in his cabinet, most people think of it as they're driving policy. He has Rubio, therefore Rubio is like this and that and this. So Trump will do this and that and that. I think Rubio will do what the hell Trump tells him to do. He'll get fired. Yeah, that's the other way around, right? Trump doesn't have an issue with firing people, and there's he seems to like it. Yeah, right. He made his moniker, right? You're fired. Yeah. And so there's a potential that Donald Trump comes in and those people basically fall in line with his policy, not necessarily their own political ideological leanings, which again leaves it up for grabs in regards to what Trump ends up doing. I want to play this clip. This is Keir Starmer, another sociopath. And Starmer is asked point blank, hey, you're not concerned about, missiles potentially being fired into the UK? Listen to what he says. And because he doesn't really have an answer for it when being pushed on this very issue. You are taking actions that may have massive ramifications. You don't care about this. Listen to Keir Starmer.
Just quickly, Russia's also threatened nuclear escalation. Are you comfortable with that when people at home are watching this, worrying that you could put us at risk?
Well, it's very important. It's very important that we're steadfast in our support for Ukraine. Russia is the aggressor,
even
and
if
Russia
it unleashes nuclear war.
Russia has to be the one that makes the move to stop this war. It's within their gift. but we must support Ukraine. It's impacting not just Ukraine, it's impacting the rest of the world, including the UK.
Is your message to viewers back home that there will not be a nuclear war? Because that is what Russia is threatening.
My message is that we need to ensure that Ukraine is put in the best possible position. This is 1,000 days of conflict, and there is a very high cost if Russian aggression is seen to pay off.
That is so deranged. Like, it is hard to get across how deranged that is. They're asking him point blank, you're not concerned that will end up in a nuclear war? And you're doing this for Ukraine? And he's like, he doesn't answer that question if you notice. He just says, well, we must stand strong with Ukraine. I know. But are you telling me that the Brits at home who are just going about their lives, doing their jobs, doing it every day, whatever they're doing, that this is worth that much that you're willing to end it all for your geopolitical project of keeping Ukraine in Western sphere? Well, we must stand by Ukraine. Like, he sounds like a sociopath. Like, he seems to be so utterly detached from the reality of what is taking place on the ground and what his policy could invite. It is weird to me, but all of them are acting this way. Do you think they think Putin is bluffing? Is that what it is?
Well, I think their ideology trumps their everything, right? Because if you think about, if you think about it, if someone says to a woman he's been dating, I love you, and looks at her waiting for her to reciprocate, do you love me? And she says, well, I think you're nice.
Right.
She's answered the question, right? She's answered that question. Right. And there's no point in saying, but you didn't tell me if you love. No, she's answered you. No is the answer, right? So when they say, hey, aren't you concerned about nuclear war? Well, we got to worry about Putin. Aren't you concerned about nuclear war? Well, he's answered the question. Yeah, no, I'm not concerned. I got a bunker. Number one. Okay, you don't, I do. Number two, we're sociopaths. That's not how we work. This is about power. We're the ruling elite. Haven't you been paying attention? We are willing, in the same way that we have no regard for Ukrainians, will throw their lives. We feel the same about our people. You know what I mean? They're showing that his view of power dynamics is the same about the Britons as it is about the Ukrainians. If you think about it, you've got like several European countries now saying, we've got to prepare our people for war.
Yeah.
We've got to go out, get some food and really, that's going to help you in nuclear war? Yeah, get some extra bandages. Yeah, because if it's nuclear war, you want to bandage those nuclear burns. You know what I mean? That'll help right away. But what they're saying is this: we think that in the same way that I said, look, I'll put it to you like this: if you see a guy who goes to the bar and gets in a fight, and then he's walking home and he gets in a fight with somebody on the street, and then he's driving home and he stops at a red light and he gets in an argument and gets in a road rage fight. When he comes home, he's going to beat the hell out of his wife and kids because his nature is he's a psychopathic person that has a violent nature, right?
No.
The same way they treat the Ukrainians and they view the Ukrainians is the same way they view the Brits. The same way that Biden and his team view the Ukrainians is the same way they view the Americans. They have no regard for our lives any more than they do for theirs. So he's just saying, leave me alone. No, I don't give a damn about nuclear war. Would you stop bugging me? And can't you see that I can't say this? I'm trying to tell you that no, I don't care if every single person in England is vaporized, as long as our goal is to get what we want, is to dominate the world. And damn it, we're willing to kill every Briton if we can't. If we can't hit that, what the hell? They might as well die anyway. If the ruling elite, if we can't run everything, screw it. What happened in 1929? All these rich people, once they lost their money, what they do? They jumped out the windows and killed themselves. I'd rather be dead if I can't be rich and run everything. That's all they're saying now in England. Hey, look, if we don't have all the power and the ruling elite can't run everything, we'll go and we'll take you guys with us. Luckily, as I said, we've seen that the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese have been far more philosophical and intellectual in their thinking,
right?
And lucky for us, or we'd all be dead already. And don't you think that Biden's decision clearly demonstrates that he has the same perspective?
Yeah, I mean, they seem to continuously take pragmatism for weakness, which puts people in this kind of horrible situation that you are forcing me to be far more aggressive than what I would typically be, because that is the only way you understand anything. Like there was one point where Putin said, "You hear me now," but that's after years. We're talking about like decades of saying NATO expansion into Georgia is unacceptable. NATO expansion into Ukraine is unacceptable, and yet here we are. And they know, they've been warned, and yet you get clips like that where Keir Starmer gets the question put to him directly. You understand that, like you pointed out, you could get every last Brit vaporized. I mean, Russia was putting out a video of how they would go about attacking all of Europe. Like basically saying
what the targets were. They showed the targets.
They showed the targets. Basically saying, we are not playing. Stop screwing with us. You're doing this on our border. And I don't think the West fully grasp that this is a country that has been at war multiple times, where they've been invaded through Ukraine. The first war, I think, killed like 10 million Russians. The second one killed 30 million Soviets. And so it's like, this is not an Xbox culture. This is a culture that has dealt with these invasions coming from the West for the last 50, 60 years with massive effect, meaning they are not effing around. And we seem to take this stuff as a bluff. Man, there's a reason that Joe Biden lost, and God bless the fact that he lost if he's willing to do insane stuff like this. It's just outrageous. Garland, last question before I let you go.
Sure.
On Trump. There's this big fight over whether or not, I think there's a woman, Sarah McBride. Sarah McBride is transgender. And one of the things that Nancy Mace did was put in a bill that effectively says men can't use women's bathrooms, even if they identify themselves as women. Now, this has created a bit of a kerfuffle because Democrats have basically gotten on a high horse on this issue and have said, well, this is outrageous. I can't believe you guys are doing that. And you're focusing on this new member of Congress. My take on this is not necessarily going to be shared by many on the left, but Sarah McBride, I don't care how she identifies herself, and I don't even care how people live. God bless you. I want people to be able to live to the fullest of their capabilities, regardless of how they identify themselves and how they see themselves. Just as a flat fact basis of operation, I want liberty for everybody. By the same token, reality is reality. And that person has an XY chromosome, and that person still has a penis. And Nancy Mace's point is, I'm a rape survivor. I've been sexually assaulted. I am deeply uncomfortable with a man being in a woman's bathroom. Now, a Democrat would say, well, that is racist. And I know it's not racist, but I'm saying using the term racist. They would say, that's completely racist. That's outrageous. That man is a woman, despite the fact that they have a penis. Give me your take on this. I mean, is this really the thing that Democrats should be like going into a fight over after losing an election? And one last point to this. I would wager that Nancy Mace knows, as a flat fact, that her argument of I must protect women's spaces works. And works in regard to the American public and works in regards to women who are looking at this fight take place, and is putting Democrats in this position of a losing position of this argument. This could be the last question, but give me your take on this. This is somewhat of a contentious issue that's been bubbling up.
A couple of things. I think it was litigated in the election. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about it. Look,
Yeah.
the Republicans took certain positions during the election. The Democrats said these positions are, unacceptable and no, they are immoral, blah, blah, blah. And they got the hell beat out of them.
Yeah.
You lost that one. So, regardless of how you or I may feel about it, right, wrong, or indifferent, it was litigated and you lost, number one. Number two, that's not something that's popular amongst the minority communities. Right. Let's be honest about it.
Right.
It's a traditional, more socially conservative minority communities, Latinos, Black people, etc. Right. That's not a winning argument in these communities that are more traditional kind of things, conservative, social conservative cultural issues. Right. And last but not least, because the Republicans know that that's something that they can use to identify the Democrats as being out of touch.
Yep.
That discussion
exactly
is out of touch. if I'm a Republican strategist, I spend 4 years screaming about, I mean, you know, there's the morality of it that's wrong and all that. And I mean, certainly, you know, I'm with you. I don't think you should screw with people, but I guess people were born that way or whatever. I don't think you should screw with these people, but I understand the argument of a woman who says, I'm uncomfortable with a male. I don't care what they call themselves. I'm uncomfortable with a male who I, as a woman, see as a male in the same way that you talk about sports. This guy's bigger and stronger than me. And if they choose to physically overpower me, there's nothing I can do to stop them. So I'm afraid. It's an existential fear in an area where I'm getting undressed and things like that. It's an existential fear. So you understand. But if I'm the Republicans, forget the morality of it from a political perspective. I spend the next 4 years arguing over, I pick a list of things that I know the Democrats have hitched their wagon to that are very unpopular. And I argue about them over and over and over. And then when the midterms come, I scream to the top of my lungs about these things that, you know, these fools are going to go bananas over. And, you know, the people are going to look at and say, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. So strategically speaking, from a political strategy for the Republicans, makes a lot of sense. And the Democrats, they are, geez, I mean, circling the drain.
I totally agree with you on this. Garland Nixon, political analyst. Garland, where can people find you these days?
They can find me on my Rumble, YouTube, and Rockfin page show. They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Telegram, and that's about it.
Garland Nixon, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate talking to you, Garland.
Thanks. Look forward to talking to you again, too.
You have a good one. Be safe.
You too.
All right. Let's bring in